So here we are at 4 o'clock today. Welcome back to our last session for this virtual conference. I'm really thrilled to conclude it with one of my favorite topics, which is people analytics. I'm here joined by my esteemed colleagues, friends, and members of the tribe of analytics community tribe that have been thinking and reflecting on what the impact of all of this abundance of data that is now becoming available, as well as new ways of thinking and measuring, and how we need to adapt what we do as practitioners. So I'd like to welcome Jeremy Shapiro, who is leading the workforce analytics and planning at Merck, Geetanjali Gamel, who is leading the insights practice at Johnson & Johnson, and Guru, he comes across as Prasanna, but he's going by Guru Sethupathy, who is the head of people strategy and analytics at Capital One. I would love to invite each one of you to just give us a little bit more about your role, your organization, and the one exciting things or one positive things that you've experienced as a result of this new reality. And would like to start with Geetanjali, are you there?
Hi, Stella. So great to be here. Thank you for having me here, and thanks to the conference board as well. So hi everyone, I am Geetanjali Gamel, and I work for Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson is, I'm sure many of you know, it's a healthcare company. We're in the pharmaceutical, medical devices, and consumer businesses. And my role there is I'm part of the larger workforce analytics and data strategy and governance organization. And there I lead a team that handles the portfolio of advanced analytics, employee experience insights, and also some reporting and analysis. So it's a lot, keeps me busy, but it's something that I really enjoy doing. And in terms of also something I would say positive that I feel like in this environment with everything going on that I'm starting to notice is that, just not having that commute. I think, I don't know how it's working out for many of you who had a bit of a commute, but I think the nice thing for me has been that I don't have any excuses not to exercise and work out now. So it's forcing me to do that because I can't say, oh, I just spent an hour driving. So that's been helpful.
I think our
great to be here today.
Longest commutes are to the kitchen and back.
Right.
Guru?
Hi there, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hopefully you can see me too. I know the light's a little bit weird on my end. Awesome, thanks for inviting me, glad to be here. I lead people strategy and analytics at Capital One. And I think the interesting insights I've had, one is, I think going through this process, it really forces you to think how you want to spend your time in a way that I didn't have to think about as much before. Like, what are the things I miss doing now that I would like to do when I go back to normal versus, oh, I'm pretty fine actually with those things that dropped off, right? And like, this is helping me separate those into those two buckets. And then the other thing is just, it's been really nice, the extra family time, I would say. The time that you normally spend, even the commuting, but like even beyond that, the time you spend kind of getting ready for work in the morning, and you can dress how you want and look how you want. And then even between meetings to be able to go up and hang out with my daughters for a little bit or whatever, just that extra family time, it's just been a lot of fun.
It definitely brings a lot more balance, unless you're constantly on the video call and don't have any moments to take a breath and recharge. Jeremy.
Cool. Well, hey everyone, and good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you are, and I hope everyone is staying well. So I get to lead the workforce analytics practice for Merck, and I'm very happy to be on a panel with Geetanjali, with Guru, and with Stela, all absolutely wonderfully skilled in this area. So you asked the question, what am I valuing in this time? One, it is hard sometimes to find the bright spot, right? Because there's a lot, particularly if you're listening to the news and you are in an area where there is proliferation going on. Sometimes it can almost feel guilty to find a benefit, but benefit finding is helpful too. So there's two things for me. One is, well, one of my daughters just asked me if I would want a cinnamon roll that they just baked off. So game on, like that's going to happen right after this. And also for the team that I work with, and they're wonderfully talented, but I'm getting to see new sides of their own lives as well, spending much more time with their kids, sometime with their furry kids as well. And so that's been really nice to see kind of the many sides of everyone that we get to work with.
Fantastic. There are a lot of positives, and I think we should all appreciate the privilege that we have, that we're able to do our work and continue to be active and engaged, which may not be the case for many and many millions. So let's dive into the topic. First of all, I know as the news broke and as we started being glued to the TV to see the number of cases and where they emerged, I know there was a lot of creative use of data that from people analytics perspective, our leaders, our community members started bringing to the organizations, like the number of cases in different regions and overlapping that to the number of employees we have in some of those countries and locations, and the potential impact and risks. So how you personally did in your organization and used data to create new insights, and what was different this time than what you typically would do? Jeremy, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that is challenging within this the current era that we're in right now is that it's not one era. That this is it's not like an event occurred and we're dealing with the aftermath of that event. So we're dealing with where there is an issue, it will proliferate and then it will come back down again. And around the world, that will all happen at different times. So one of the things that I've noticed is that our response to this type of event is highly decentralized. And so when you have a decentralized approach, we need to focus a lot both on driving data-driven decisions, along with really good frameworks for driving decision-making down to the best level that can really address issues on the ground. So what employees require PPE to do specific tasks? Let's make sure that the right norm in Ireland is dealing and answering that question, and making sure that the organization can fully support them. So the way that we've been focusing our time from an analytics perspective really focuses in on in order of priority. One is ensuring employee safety and employee health. And in that regard, so we happen to have taken some of the open source data from Johns Hopkins, and I don't know who's hosting the Johns Hopkins data set for the website, but they get a gold star in all of this going on for the number of people that are clicking and clicking and clicking all around. But they've been they've been great in providing this open data source. So we've been overlaying contagion data from public sources with company data as well, so that we can have leadership visibility into badge swipe information at facilities. What's our facility status? Are they operating the way that we expect them to operate? So that we can have essentially a very real-time evaluation of all of these different situations that are coming, that are going up and down. There are, particularly, so Geetanjali and I both work in pharmaceuticals, and so there's a particular responsibility in ensuring the supply chain as well. And so there's a fair amount of work that's done to ensure that we can continue to manufacture, and we can continue to make sure that patients that are relying on medicines are able to get them. So we really try to focus in on priorities and in those ways. And then over time, we'll think more and more about productivity and what is the new normal. And so those answers, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more today, but those are some of the quick takes.
Great. Geetanjali, do you have a point of view?
Yeah,
and
you know, I definitely would echo many of the things that Jeremy said. You know, that we want to ensure the same thing, that the supply chain is working well, that our colleagues who are working in the labs to make sure that we are getting where we need to be with the vaccine, that they're enabled, right, in every way possible. I think with J&J, I've said this before as well, is that being a Credo-based company, so we have this J&J Credo that is very central to how we do everything that we do. And the second paragraph in that is about employees and our responsibility to employees. So I think in some ways, nothing has changed because that's still our focus as it was before. And in other ways, some things have changed in the sense that obviously we have to have a different lens, right? Now with everything that's going on in the world, our focus, I think everything we're doing is with the lens of employee sentiment. How is this impacting the well-being of employees? How are they feeling? Are they feeling valued? Are they feeling supported? Do they have what they need? What's changing week to week? Because again, this is a rapidly changing situation, and every week can bring something different. So one of the things that we did was we started doing a weekly employee pulse, and I think that's been great in helping us understand where we're doing well, where we need to focus more, and how employees are interacting with the company and engaging with the company. And I think besides that, looking at some of the data that you would expect, understanding call center data. So, you have the COVID hotline that we have, and our employees are, calling in there. So looking at the volumes of that, the trends, and also in the types of calls that you get, right? That tells you a lot in terms of where do we now have a pretty good handle on getting the information that people need to them, and then where do we need to be proactive and move faster, because this might be coming up next. So I think we're trying to be as leading as possible in giving the information to our colleagues so they can act fast and get that information out to employees as quickly as possible. So looking at communications, understanding how people are engaging with our digital platforms to get the information that they need, and is it hitting the mark? So I think all of those things, and then taking all that, and similar to what Jeremy said, like overlaying that with external data, like Johns Hopkins, again, yes, absolutely gold stars and everything else to them for doing this. But I think, overlaying that and trying to understand how those trends, how this real situation that's unfolding in real time, how is that impacting employees, and how can we really be proactive in getting them what they need and in understanding, where they are in terms of their well-being and their needs. That's been the focus.
Excellent point. And what I pick up is these keywords, right? Real time, fast, pulsing. Now we're getting very precise and focused and timely. And it's so important that now we have data at our fingertips to help us do that. Guru, Capital One has been well known for anything to be data-driven. So do you see any changes now in the types of data or types of measurements that you're looking?
So let me share kind of the couple of things, the ways we're involved with this work and how that's changed or maybe mutated a little bit.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't intend it, but maybe I should, should have thought about it. First off, right, just the basic, I think +1 on a lot of that was shared by Jeremy and Geetanjali, right? So the initial phase was very much about just reporting and understanding the data. Things as simple as like who's still in our offices, who's working from home. One of the cool things was Capital One was one of the first companies to move quickly to stop travel and then get everyone to work from home. And that was awesome because not only did we, did our associates feel great about that, but from what I've heard in the external market and where we are located, other companies looked to us and then made their own decisions kind of referencing our move. And so that's awesome to think that we could have that push in the region in general. And I got a lot of that was data driven, right? In terms of understanding what type of work needs to happen in the office, what doesn't, what's the nature of how things are moving so quickly. and then how quickly can we get people out of the offices? We moved 50,000 people essentially in a matter of weeks. The next step beyond that is then moving from like the descriptive stuff that we're providing pretty much in real time to workforce planning. So now my team is involved in that side of things in terms of thinking of, hey, attrition has definitely changed. I'm sure everybody is noticing that in their organizations. And so how do we think through attrition and what that's going to look like for the rest of the year? How does that impact hiring and our workforce and all those things? So working pretty closely with, again, the CFO, CHRO, and CEO on those kind of questions of, hey, what is our workforce going to look like for the rest of this year and into 2021? Geetanjali mentioned this as well. Surveys, huge role that we're playing there, and in terms of getting a pulse of our population, but also not just like in terms of how they're feeling and are they feeling supported, but as now we move to thinking about return to work, what might that look like? What are the principles we should be having around a return to work strategy? Being able to use survey data to influence and shape that. It could be productivity type stuff. It could be other types of like safety type, psychological safety and physical safety type stuff as well that we're starting to measure. And then the last thing from a strategic standpoint is also thinking about what are the lessons we've learned? I mean, in a sense, Stella, you started the conversation with that, but like, hey, what as a workforce, as a company, what are the things we're learning about our talent that are either confirming existing hypotheses or refuting existing hypotheses? So when we come out of this, we can say, hey, let's accelerate some of this stuff that we were already going down, and maybe, whoa, we thought X, Y, Z about co-location, and now that has been disrupted. You know, thinking through some of those really big strategic levers for 2021 is something we're doing as well.
And it's such an important point about the workforce planning, right? We're having a tough time predicting what tomorrow may look like and when we will reopen and if we will reopen, all of these questions. And what is the business reality going to be? What industries are going to transform and reshape, and the consumer preferences, and there's a lot of unpredictable futures and scenarios, and planning for that is really difficult. It's almost like you have to have a scenario for every single possible outcome and try to optimize as more information becomes available and we'll learn more about it. And speaking of prediction, and while I have you, we'll start with you, Guru, and then we'll move around. When you think about all the models that were built, prediction models, right? They use the historical data to then help us understand some of the patterns and learn from those patterns and come up with predictions and have a confidence level about that. What is your point of view about, I refer to it, BC, before COVID reality, DC during COVID, and AC after COVID. How are we going to have to think about our models and predictions and tools that we've been using that were trained on the historical data that may not necessarily reflect what the future will be?
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts there. I also want to refer back to a point you're making on workforce planning. That's one of those muscles that organizations have a tough time building. I've seen that in many instances. But one of the nice moments, one of the positive, small positives of a crisis is it causes you to build certain muscles. And I think workforce planning is one of those because you are dealt with a whole range of uncertain possibilities, and you really have to think through those probabilities and think through different scenarios that you aren't forced to do in normal times, I think. And so if one benefit of this is really strengthening that muscle. With regards to your question about prediction, I think there's a couple of thoughts I have. One is, even in the models that we build currently, we don't only use time series data, right? So I think what you're referring to is time series data, and how, if you use time series data in prediction, how is any model you've built in the past going to be relevant at all? And attrition prediction is one good example of that. You can't, right? I would say it's garbage at this point. But we use kind of a multiple set of techniques there. So another set of techniques you can imagine using is using kind of demographic data and thinking through various aspects of that, using engagement data and thinking through aspects of that. You also have to realize the external market conditions are completely different than January 2020, right? One of the hottest labor markets we've had in a while, and now we have something quite different. And so not only are things changed internally, but then things have changed quite a bit externally as well. So I think it's a combination of, hey, you want to have pretty sophisticated models that are not just time series, but kind of multidimensional. But then there's also just a lot of judgment that goes into play. So we've looked at kind of past recessions as well, We have data from going all the way back to 2000, 2001 crisis, 2008 crisis, and kind of looking at different kind of benchmarks from those periods to see how different parameters and different variables kind of moved in that time. And so there's really, it's an art and a science, I think, to be able to think through the different scenarios.
Thank you. Jeremy, do you have a point of view?
Well, yeah, I do, and I concur largely with Guru on this, but just kind of broadening the question out to what are the tools that you use in a time like this as well. So there are plenty of tools that we have, but we probably aren't the best. It's probably not the best time to use them actively as well. So a predictive attrition model is not something that you're talking to senior leaders about when circumstances are changing. So being decision useful is probably the most important prescription for the team on something like this. So you pick what kind of modeling is helpful right now, as Guru was mentioning, forward-looking models to help understand what's the best that can happen, what's the worst that might happen, what are the sensitivity points and what are the leverage points that we should be aware of. That's probably one of the more helpful guideposts on what tool do you use at the time.
Great point. Geetanjali?
Yeah, and I think, I was just thinking, this is no fun because we all agree with each other. There's no debate. We all kind of are concurring because it's, we all agree with this. And I think, Guru and Jeremy pretty much covered like some of the major points around this. I think the only thing I would add is, besides the fact that I think we'll have to be more nimble with thinking about scenarios and scenario analysis and, leading indicators and things which may be dependent on, just more robust predictive models, the way that we use in certain ways now, to even things that are very simple, right, and formulaic, but they're using more current data and they're giving us information that we need in the short run. But I think what we'll have to be very aware of is that there are, cyclical changes that happen, and then there are big structural changes. And some of the things that are happening right now are more cyclical in nature, like the hiring, et cetera, things that are impacted as the labor markets are getting impacted. And that might come back and normalize at some point. But there might be some other structural shifts that are more permanent. Whether right now I'm thinking like even things like ways of working and, facilities and planning for that. To so remote work or even travel activity, like things like that, where there may be some longer term structural shifts. We'll have to think about prediction and planning in a slightly different way.
Exactly. And I think the other part is what we optimize for, right? Previously, we were talking about, attrition, prevention of the top talent, but now that attrition may look different for different segments, right? If you may have people who have been running on adrenaline for the past several months, and now we're waiting for a return to work, will we see a very different behavior? And some people will use this crisis as a moment of reckoning and either choose a different path and leave, or be so exhausted just because they've been stretched for a long period of time that they will not be able to sustain the level of productivity. So now optimizing not just for productivity and efficiency and retention, but more for safety and mental health and well-being could probably be a whole new set of predictions and areas where analytics can help support some of the decisions around those segments of population. Excellent points. So I'm hoping this is where you will start disagreeing with each other, or at least have diverging points of views. What is the future? And I know none of us have crystal balls, despite of the army of algorithms that we have at our disposal or we can create. But let's venture to think about what is that new normal, what shape it may take, and how we as analytics practitioners can start either enabling our leaders think differently, or even what new standards we may have to develop for the workplace. And Geetanjali, since I have you, would like to start?
Sure. So I think, just kind of picking up from where I left off, I do think there will be some changes in the ways we work, and it'll create some interesting questions for people analytics teams to work on, and others too. I mean, in talent management and assessments, and everyone will have some new interesting problems of around measurement. But I think it's that that's just more exciting work for us, right? So I think as you think about possibly a shift towards more digital tools, more virtual interactions. Like one of the things that comes to mind is, well, human to human connection, right? That's important, and thinking about that and how do we wrap our hands around that? Productivity and workload, collaboration. So if you think about the workday, the way it's spread today is probably different from what it was a few months ago, and some of it might stick going forward. So how does that impact, the hours you work, or what does it mean to be after hours, or what does that mean for the focus time you get versus, the time you spend in collaboration over phone or email or chat or whatever other channels you use. So I think there are a lot of those things in the future that I think will come to play, and we'll have to think about, well, how do you think about performance and productivity and, like workload in times like those? Another thing I was thinking about, and I don't know, maybe it's not that funny. It made me laugh. It was my own joke, but but I was thinking that when you think about development, for example, and traditionally, like development, there was a lot said about getting like FaceTime. Now we might not get FaceTime, but we might be on FaceTime to do it. So or Zoom, I don't know, or Teams. But the idea is that how do you think about making sure that you're still able to provide that onboarding experience or the right sort of development opportunities when you might be doing things differently? What do you think about leadership traits when leadership might now mean leading teams that are generally physically dispersed, or where you have to be more agile in ways of working, or be more adaptable to change? So I think those are a lot of things that I think will be part of the new normal. And another area that came to my mind was, so most of us, right, in this field have been for a while thinking about understanding skills and understanding capabilities, which is great. But now, even more so than before, I feel like that's become so important, because if you think about it, if there are teams who for some reason find themselves not being able to do what they used to do in the given situation, wouldn't it be great if we knew of another area where they could quickly shift focus? That area could use their help, and they could still be engaged and motivated and be able to contribute. So I think just being able to be more nimble and creative around those type of questions, once the situation starts to calm down, I think we'll be like deep in understanding those bigger questions, all across the board, I think, for people analytics.
And the beautiful part, we'll have a lot more data now that everyone is interacting virtually. Guru, would you like to share your future prediction and how we may adopt it?
I'll take your bait, Stella, and I'll say, look, maybe I'll disagree maybe with the others on this, and I'll try to be provocative here. I actually think not a lot will change, right? And part of that is, I think, recency bias. I think right now we're in the moment, and this seems like such a huge deal, and it is a huge deal. But I think inertia is just an incredibly powerful factor in human nature, and that's so I think when we're on the other side of this, maybe not 2021, but as we look forward, I think there's a lot that will look the same, right? And so the next year will look quite different, but I think in a lot of ways things will look the same. I think there's two things though I will call out that I think could be interesting things to look out for and watch outs and see how they progress. One is automation. One thing I you've seen in the past, and I think we will see here, is recessions are oftentimes that companies use that opportunity to like increase their investment in automation. And this one is fascinating because I think that will actually accelerate even more, because the underlying nature of the work in a lot of places is people physically cannot be with other people, right? That's what we're talking about. And so what better way to continue that work in happening by like automating that work with machines or with something else, right? So I think automation is going to play a really interesting role here. The other call out I will have is just thinking through what the generation, what the impact on this generation, right? Like think about the folks who came into the job market in 2008 and the impacts that had on them, both from a job market outcome, but also from a psychic outcome of like the struggles of entering the job market during a deep recession. Those folks are, now probably in their mid 30s and are going to experience another huge recession. And just like, what is the impact on that for people? Like, does this shift thinking and risk taking in the economy at the individual level? Are people going to like move towards just much safer employment outcomes and employment situations? What about the folks entering the job market now in 2020 and like that impact? So I think those two things could be quite dramatic impacts: automation and kind of the psychic impacts on particular parts of the labor force.
It's a good point. And I think with the automation, it's not just the meetings and collaboration and events and esports, but I think there is going to have to be a new sets of touchless interfaces that will have to be developed now that we really cannot interact physically or be closer than 6, at least until we have a way to treat and we have a way to inoculate people. So it's a great point. So Jeremy, you always have an opinion that brings diverging opinions closer together. So would you like to attempt?
I'll do my best. Okay, so we'll try, you'll judge, and then up and down. Like and subscribe. So the question, there's a brother-sister question that keeps on going through my mind right now, and that is, what do we choose to keep? As this is going through, and Guru's point about creatures of habit is well taken. The only things that'll change are the things that we change. The things that there are a set of assumptions that many of us were carried around with us on. I need X to do the work. I need an office in order to do this. How can I have a one-on-one conversation with someone and really deeply get to know what their motivations are if I can't see them in reality, in real time? So Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman had a piece in Bloomberg, a video clip in Bloomberg from just a couple of days ago that said, now that we know that we can send tens of thousands of employees home and be productive, I guarantee you that our real estate footprint will be reduced. That is the answer to the question for him, what do we choose to keep? For others of us, it's about how we work and where decision rights might occur too. So if you're experiencing the same thing that I've kind of noticed, is we're able to accelerate decision making because we can accelerate decision making now. Will we keep it? So are some of those benefits there? For some organizations, they were already there. You're on Slack, you're kind of making the decision on the fly, you're understanding where that's going, and that's moving in the right direction. But to the extent to which you've noticed behaviors that are net helpful, this is an opportunity for us to really go and grab the intentionality dimension here. So as analysts and as folks who are responsible for pointing out patterns, I feel it's our job to put evidence in front of the right parties so that we can make informed decisions on that question of, here's what just happened. What do we like about this, and what could we keep?
And it's hopeful that we will preserve the good things about these digital ways of working. And I hope a lot of people realize that, yes, short commute to the kitchen is not a bad thing. And you can be just as productive, even though the kids are screaming or dogs are barking. Hopefully more people will take advantage of this transition, as well as choose the things that empower the workers to make decision, to decide about their schedule. It's more about the outcomes than being present or being in front of the computer all day long. And this brings me to a question that came up on several occasions in several articles. There seems to be this increase in purchasing of tools, online monitoring tools. So yes, you have now a lot more access to data, and you can observe who talks to whom and how, and do a lot of exciting analysis. But that comes with a kind of a darker side of this monitoring. And how do you feel about this trend? Do you think it's something positive? Do you think that's negative? Do you think there is an opportunity and also a call to action to take a specific stand on how this data is being used? What's your point of view on this? And we can start with you, Jeremy, since you were the last.
Well, as you describe it, that sounds pretty creepy to me. I don't know if I want to do any of that. So look, tools in the wrong hands for the wrong intent can create bad results. Yeah. And the important component of the type of work that we do in people analytics is to use tools for good and to really understand what the progress means and how to further strengthen leaders, how to further strengthen employees for what they're doing. So the tools in good hands, working with the appropriate privacy guidelines, working with works councils, working with the groups that are very transparent in these ways, you can do some really good things for an organization and create differentiation. You got to use them right and responsibly.
Exactly, because constant monitoring may be creating even more anxiety than before.
Right.
So, Geetanjali, do you have a point of view on this?
Yeah, I think, I think Jeremy really summed that well. I mean, honestly, I don't even like the term monitoring, because I think to me that in itself that doesn't sound like that's intended right? So I don't even think of it as monitoring, does not sit well with me. As far as tools go, there are lots of tools out there. Even these types of tools where you can understand time use or activity, these are not new. And they have been used before COVID. They'll probably be used during and after COVID. I think, again, it comes back to why. Like, if you really have a good reason why you're using it, if you feel comfortable that you can be totally transparent about it, if you've worked with all of the right legal partners, you understand the privacy implications, and you have, you're transparent about it and you're using it for the right reasons, then maybe it could result, in something it's really impactful and helpful for employees. But I think it really has to be done right.
Good point. And Guru?
Yeah, +1 on both what they said. I mean, we have a pretty conservative approach when it comes to this. I think our employee trust is kind of paramount. And there has to be a really, really, really compelling case to even think about some of these things. The one caveat I will say is where there's opportunities for people to opt in. So if I'm personally wanting to get help on improving my productivity or whatever that may be, and so our team is actually working on this to build out a nudge platform using data, insights, personalization, and nudges to help people who want to opt in and say, hey, I want to get better at X, Y, Z, and we will help them with that through data and technology. But otherwise, no, is kind of where we stand.
I'm so glad to hear that, because that's absolutely the responsible way of using data for the right reason, to create a better workplace, not just to put scrutiny and create more anxiety in the workers that they need. So I'll go through a few questions that we got through the chat. So first question was from Maria. I'm curious whether the speakers are seeing whether external hiring is still possible in their companies. Are there any analytics or KPIs they have around that? So I know some companies froze their hiring activities, but not all. So if you are one of those lucky companies, any new measurements are you looking at for hiring?
Well, measurements, I mean, since you asked about external as well, I mean, I think some people have actually posted some really, really good external data on where the hiring has happened right now. I mean, the labor market has shifted so dramatically, but there still are opportunities as well. So I think MC's done some really nice work here. There's some local resources, particularly in California, that were quite impressive on this as well. So the external labor market data I would definitely look at. I'd probably start with MC. I'd do a little bit with Indeed as well to kind of rally the troops in this way.
Great. Geetanjali, this question was for you related to the pulse data. I think the biggest question that was BC as well present. How do you avoid survey fatigue?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think to me, and these are not my words, I actually heard somebody else say that, but I was like, that's right, and I'm going to use that someday. But I think, I heard this, that there is nothing like survey fatigue. There's something like survey inaction. And I believe that. And when I heard it put that way, I was like, that's how I wanted it articulated. So now I understand what it is. So, we've all heard so much about survey fatigue, and we do try to be very mindful. We don't want to over survey people just because we can. But the idea is that if you can actually close the loop and show the outcomes, and that we listened, we heard you, and here's what we did. Now tell us, did this work? Did this, make the difference that you were looking for? I think if you're doing that, then I don't believe that there's a problem of survey fatigue. I think it's survey inaction. If you just keep asking people to spend time out of their day to give you their feedback, and then you do nothing with it, I think then you will see survey fatigue.
Whoever said that, I'm gonna adopt it too. So,
Right.
Gold star.
Yes, gold star.
Guru, I don't know if you want to answer any of the above, or you're ready for the next question.
Yeah, I can hit on both those quickly. First one, we're doing more work on the internal side. So we're actually collecting some pretty interesting metrics on internal mobility and internal gaps in terms of, like, as you think about it, even if we don't pause hiring, there'll probably be a slowdown at some point. Like, we'll have to see how these things manifest. And so if so, like, how are we making sure work is allocated in the right ways across an entire company of 60,000 people, right? So there's some interesting metrics and diagnostics that we're building around internal mobility, actually. And then, yeah, completely agree with Geetanjali's point. I've just been amazed at how much people are willing to do surveys. The response rates, even when you survey them a lot, is quite high if they feel like something is going to happen. And so it's been pretty inspiring to see that.
Exactly. There's another question on whether there are people analytics tools to measure the emotions of people working in a lonely manner, and how does the constantly on mode impact productivity? I suspect this is somewhat related to some of the organizational network analysis that we could do and other types of analytics. Any one of you have looked at those type of data?
We have not.
Not yet. It's too soon. I think right now everybody is just reaction.
It's early.
Yeah.
It's really early for it. Yep.
That's right.
Another question from Tara. Thanks so much. Very interesting. Regarding data ethics with AI, are you developing data ethics charters with regards to AI? And if so, how it was developed and implemented?
I can jump in there. And one more point I forgot to make on the survey stuff. You can actually do a lot, depending on what level and what the purpose of the survey is, you can do a lot of sampling so that you don't have to hit every single person. We're just like J&J, like we're doing pulse surveys. And so we don't need to, especially if the purpose is at a very broad level to get a pulse, you don't need to hit every associate, right? So there's other ways of addressing that. When it comes to data governance, this has been a huge focus of ours for the last year or so. HR data, what is the governance around it? Who gets to see what, at what levels of aggregation, in what form, so on and so forth. There's a lot of different dimensions to think through here. How does data get used in models, all of that stuff. We've developed some pretty detailed governance around it. I think it's been successful because of the partnership between our team and then the various owners of HR data, meaning if it's recruiting data, the head of recruiting kind of is the ultimate owner, we call it, of that data, and they get to make the final call, and we bring the framework and we bring suggestions and strategic partnership, but like that person needs to kind of pull the trigger on like what the final answer is. And so that leaves the onus on them in terms of being comfortable with that decision, because there's always really big trade-offs in terms of how transparent you want to be with data and also thinking about privacy. So that model, that kind of hub and spoke model of thinking through the governance has been really, really helpful for us.
Excellent. Geetanjali or Jeremy, do you have a charter for this type of analysis?
Yeah, I would say we have a entire team that is devoted to data strategy and governance. So, you know, there's definitely, to the point that Guru is just making, we have a lot of very intentional, purposeful effort around data governance, data quality, around making sure that, you know, data owners are accountable and also connected in with how all of this is happening. Yeah. You know, to the question, to the original question, I don't think it's specifically only geared towards AI in particular. I think that's, you know, that's something that's part of, right, broadly all the different types of analytics that you can think of. But I think when it comes to data governance, when it comes to privacy, we want to make sure that the work we do across the board, even if it's simple analysis, all the way to something that is touching AI, that we have the right governance in place. So yeah, we have a lot of like concerted effort there.
Jeremy, if you have any thoughts on this?
We do have an AI ethics charter, and the thing that I think was the most important realization is it's not just an HR thing. It was actually driven out of our AI COE, the folks that are developing across the board for everything, because they're developing tool sets that happen to touch multi-stakeholders, and because they touch multi-stakeholders, we're a part of a structure here that we need to think about in that way as well. So once you start going down this road, it needs to be robust.
I love that, because it's the whole theme of this conference, right? It's not just HR that has to be involved. It's not just analytics. We have to rethink a lot of norms, a lot of ways of working, the way we learn, the way we plan, the way we adapt. And it's such an important message for us practitioners, HR professionals, technologists, pedagogy. Everyone has to work together to shape what that new reality is going to look like. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and for being part of this experience. I want to end with a little surprise. I have here, since this is a new experience for all of us at the conference board, I want to first thank the technical team and everyone who was involved in planning and pulling this off. I also would like to invite John Brewer, who is a master at organizing conferences, and he's also our bard in residence. He writes poems, and it's his way of processing the information from the entire conference. So I'd like to offer the mic to John to close the conference with his new creation of today.
Well, thank you, Stella. I certainly appreciate the opportunity of doing this. Normally, I would, of course, be leaping out of a cake at this point and presenting my finished work. One thing I will say that I've noticed, I think the one thing I've learned most from this event today is Stella has made several references to the commute from her desk to the fridge. So I think that's probably something that we could all learn from. So anyway, I'm a colleague of Stella's. I'm unique in being on the screen at this point, and I'm the first person who's been part of this program who isn't an expert. So I design business conferences. Human capital analytics is one of them, and I've worked with Stella on that, and I do some D&I work with the board. But she asked me to come in and just very briefly summarize the event. And then she says, I'm in the habit of doing this in verse. This is a new experience for me, doing it in this way. Normally I'd have a little more time to work on things. She asked me yesterday, and I felt I had to say yes. So I do apologize. Any faults and errors here are purely my own. This is my take on the event. So it's going to take about 5 minutes tops. So do bear with us. And thank you, Stella, for the opportunity. And I've certainly really enjoyed all the sessions. So here we are at the end of the day, but there's one more thing before you go on the way. Stella asked me to summarize these presentations, highlight the main points, identify relations. It's a task I find exceedingly hard, but one I cannot just discard. Not helped by the fact I do it in rhyme, I'm sure simple prose would have taken me less time. So now, my brief poem I will recite. It's really just a list of the things I wanted to highlight. There's only one thing I know about the new normal. We'll all be in sweatpants. The future's informal. Everything else has changed overnight, but I don't have any special insight. About the future, there are no facts. We will create it through our decisions and through our acts. What happens next is not preordained, neither by the past or future are we constrained. But things will be different. We can see the proof, like the unemployment rate going through the roof. So whether it's another great recession or, God forbid, a second depression, we have to go digital. We have no choice. But in doing so, try and give everyone a voice. If COVID's the lemon, going digital's lemonade. It's a long-term solution. It's not a band-aid. But it's a challenge you can't evade. It's a transformation. It's not an upgrade. Accommodate everyone. We all have special needs. You won't be judged by your words, but your deeds. Seek progress, then, not perfection, but work with purpose. Don't allow deflection. Going back to the old ways isn't allowed. Better get used to working in the cloud. But all clouds have their silver lining, even if we didn't get to choose the timing. There's one thing on which we can all agree: the future's not what it used to be. Everything's changing and changing fast. The future's not a continuation of the past. The status quo, it simply didn't last. So listen to what your employees say, like Feedback Friday at Workday. Microsoft has a daily pulse to keep track of a workforce in flux. We're not going back to the way things were. You need to change now. You can't defer. No matter what you might prefer, this is new to us all. We're all improvising. We're all amateur. Act now, don't hesitate. If you don't act now, you'll be too late. No other route is allowed. Throw out legacy systems, go to the cloud. Above all, avoid stagnation. Let data drive your transformation. That analytics are the foundation. Amidst all the change you're seeing, use analytics to focus on employee well-being. Analyze your call center action to see where what you're doing is creating traction. Having data helps you make decisions, but remember to act even without precision. It can help you as your people return. Reality will have changed. There'll be much to unlearn. Right now, the future's looking fragile. It's time to be flexible, be agile. Don't let technology wag the business dog. Keep your focus on that. Cut through the fog. It's all about the human connection. You can't ignore the human dimension. It's not time for doing things the same. COVID quite simply has changed the game. There's no solution that's plug and play. It's going to take hard work to save this day. In digital, there's no one size fits all, but don't let the screen become a wall. Don't let the screen get in the way. Design a system that's child's play. Here's a principle that's conclusive. Design an environment that's inclusive. Think about touch, vision, hearing. Being inclusive's the floor, not the ceiling. Create a culture where everyone feels they belong, where people are committed. They're not just going along. Let this simple fact be your creed. Make your text easy to read. Don't forget images, videos, forms, and links. Your site's not a riddle, and you're not the Sphinx. Build psychological safety, transparency, trust, or else your efforts will be a bust. And to make sure everyone belongs and performs, establish structures, guidelines, and norms. Some find video an intrusion. For others, it's an avenue to inclusion. Find the solutions that fit you and your team, and ask, don't assume. Things are never what they seem. To get your people in the know, use digital to create learning in the flow. If you don't, your people, they just won't budge. Create a happy path, personas, data, give them a nudge. I'll end now because you probably feel like you've heard enough. You'll need grit to keep going when things are tough. Curiosity and questioning to inquire about stuff. You'll need humor because resilience is a must, and credibility you'll need to build people's trust. Otherwise, your digital transformation will turn to dust. Use technology to raise the human spirit. We're all in this together. We're not here for a visit. I'll say again what I said at the start, because getting this right is less science and more of an art. In the future, there are no facts. You can't move forward by looking back. And let me tell you something you may not know. We are writing history as we go. And one last thing while I have you all listening and seated, digital transformation is hard. It's never ending. It's never completed. And I know it's so easy to feel depleted. So while you'll be challenged, may you never be defeated. Thank you.
And it's time to drop the mic. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm available for children's birthday parties and bar mitzvahs as well. I should say that.
Well done, John.
That was
So
amazing.
thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. And we have a lot of comments asking to post and share this summary because that really reflected everything that was touched upon today. So thank you, the panelists. Thank you, the technical team. Thanks to everybody who was in the background making everything work smoothly. And more importantly, thank you everyone who participated and was part of this event and stayed for the entire duration. Go adopt the digital mentality and do it in an inclusive way. Do the right things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.